Our first descent into darkness takes us to the desolate, fog-shrouded moors of rural England, specifically to the isolated village of Oakhaven, a place where ancient stones hold forgotten histories and the wind carries whispers of the past. It's here, amidst the stark beauty and brooding atmosphere, that a woman simply vanished. The year was 1987. Ilara Vance, a renowned historical linguist, had sought refuge in Oakhaven. She was a woman of quiet intensity, known for her groundbreaking work on ancient Celtic dialects. She'd rented an old stone cottage, Blackwood Croft, on the very edge of the moors, a place notorious amongst the locals for its peculiar silence and the unsettling feeling it evoked. Ilara was deep into her research, poring over centuries-old texts, seemingly oblivious to the growing unease in the village. Locals, a tight-knit community, whispered about odd lights seen on the moors at night, about livestock found mutilated, and about a feeling of being watched. They attributed it to the old stories, the moor spirits or the hungry fog, but a subtle thread of genuine fear ran beneath their superstitions. On the evening of October 27th, a storm of unusual ferocity swept over Oakhaven. Winds howled like banshees, and rain lashed against windows. Ilara Vance was last seen by Mrs. Gable, the village postmistress, who delivered a late parcel, a collection of antique maps. Mrs. Gable later described Ilara as looking distracted, almost feverish, her eyes fixed on something unseen. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine, almost unnatural stillness. But Ilara Vance was gone. The cottage was undisturbed. Her research papers lay neatly on the desk. A half-finished cup of tea sat cold on a coaster. The front door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. It was as if she had simply dematerialized. The local police, bewildered, conducted an extensive search of the moors. Teams of officers, search dogs, even a small helicopter were deployed. They found nothing. No footprints, no discarded clothing, no disturbed earth. The moor, it seemed, had swallowed her whole. Weeks turned into months. The official explanation became presumed lost on the moors, a polite euphemism for an unsolvable mystery. But the villagers knew better. They spoke of the strange lights, now seen more frequently, pulsating and shifting in the deep fog. They whispered of the silence in Blackwood Croft, a silence so profound it felt like a scream frozen in time. Detective Inspector Thomas Blackwood, the lead investigator, a man known for his meticulous nature, found himself increasingly unnerved. He kept returning to Ilara's cottage, searching for an answer. One evening, as dusk settled and the moors began to fade into an inky blackness, Blackwood stood in Ilara's study. A peculiar draft snaked through the seemingly sealed room. He noticed a faint, almost imperceptible scratching on the underside of Ilara's desk, hidden from casual view. He knelt, pulling out a flashlight. The scratching was a series of symbols, etched crudely but deeply into the old wood. They were not modern letters, nor any language he recognized. They were ancient, primordial, and filled with a disturbing resonance. As he stared at them, a sudden, piercing cold descended, not from the wind, but from within the very walls. And then, a whisper. So faint, so fleeting, he almost dismissed it as the wind. But it was clear, distinct, and it spoke a single word. Seek. Seek. What was Ilara Vance seeking? Or was something seeking her? And what ancient horrors slumbered beneath the silent, watchful moors of Oakhaven, waiting for another soul to claim? Following the chilling discovery of the etched symbols beneath Ilara Vance's desk, Detective Inspector Blackwood was gripped by an unsettling conviction. This was no ordinary disappearance. The symbols, alien and unsettling, seemed to resonate with the very fabric of Blackwood Croft. He began to research, poring over ancient texts and folklore, not just of the region, but of forgotten languages and pre-Celtic glyphs. His colleagues dismissed it as a distraction, a detective grasping at straws. But Blackwood couldn't shake the feeling that a deeper, darker narrative was unfolding. He returned to the cottage repeatedly, sometimes late at night, when the moon cast long, eerie shadows across the moors. He found himself sensitive to subtle changes in the atmosphere of the house. Sudden drops in temperature, faint, almost imperceptible sounds like distant sighs, and a pervasive scent of damp earth and something indefinably metallic. He meticulously documented the symbols, sending sketches to a reclusive academic known for his expertise in obscure ancient languages, Dr. Alastair Finch, who, initially skeptical, soon became disturbingly fascinated. Dr. Finch's initial analysis confirmed Blackwood's suspicion. The symbols were indeed pre-Celtic, possibly even pre-human in origin, linked to rituals and beliefs far older than recorded history. He described them as warding symbols, used in ancient times to either contain or invoke entities of immense power. The unsettling implication was clear. If they were warding symbols, what were they warding against? Or, more terrifyingly, what were they trying to summon? One blustered evening, during one of his solitary vigils at Blackwood Croft, Blackwood noticed something new. In the fading light, on the old unpainted wall above the fireplace, a faint, almost transparent outline had begun to appear. It was barely visible, like a water stain slowly blossoming. As he watched, mesmerized, the outline began to take shape. It was a face. Not clearly defined, but unmistakably a human visage, contorted in an expression of abject horror. It was a silent scream etched into the very plaster of the house. Blackwood felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was a manifestation. He immediately photographed it, his hands trembling. The face seemed to be pressing out from the wall, its eyes wide and hollow. The more he looked at it, the more he felt an overwhelming sense of despair, a feeling of being trapped. He consulted with Dr. Finch again, sending him the photographs. Finch's response was immediate and urgent. He recognized the pattern of what he called spectral impressions, residual psychic energy, often left behind in places of intense emotional trauma. But the clarity and distinctness of the face at Blackwood Croft suggested a force far greater than mere residue. Finch theorized that the cottage, built on ancient ley lines, might be acting as a conduit, a focal point for something malevolent that had been dormant for centuries. The more Blackwood investigated, the more the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. He started experiencing vivid, disturbing dreams of Alara Vance, not as she was, but as a spectral figure, her mouth open in a soundless shriek, reaching out to him from an impossible distance. The dreams left him exhausted and terrified. He knew, with a horrifying certainty, that Alara Vance was not just lost, she was a captive. And the walls of Blackwood Croft were not just whispering, they were screaming. The spectral impression of the screaming face in Blackwood Croft intensified, becoming clearer, more agonizingly vivid with each passing day. Detective Inspector Blackwood, now consumed by the case, found his rational mind struggling against the encroaching supernatural. Dr. Alastair Finch, the academic, became Blackwood's only confidant in this descent into the bizarre. Finch's research into the ancient symbols revealed a terrifying mythology, a forgotten pantheon of entities known only as the Old Ones, beings from a realm beyond human comprehension, capable of influencing reality through ritual and resonance. Finch believed that Alara Vance, with her deep dive into obscure ancient languages, might have inadvertently stumbled upon the very rituals or knowledge that could awaken or even summon one of these entities. Blackwood Croft, situated on a confluence of powerful ley lines, was not just a house, but a potential gateway. The symbols on the desk, Finch posited, were not just wards, but perhaps the beginnings of a sequence, a key to unlock something terrifying. As Blackwood spent more time in the cottage, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They were not human voices, but a cacophony of sound that seemed to emanate from the very air. Clicks, hisses, guttural growls, and an almost melodic drone that pulsed with malevolence. He began to feel a presence, cold and immense, pressing down on him, a weight in the air that stole his breath and chilled him to the bone. One night, Blackwood was alone in the cottage, meticulously examining the walls for any further signs. He found a loose stone in the fireplace, hidden behind years of soot. With a crowbar, he pried it open, revealing a small, dark cavity. Inside lay a wooden box, intricately carved with more of the same ancient symbols. His heart hammered against his ribs as he opened it. The box contained a single item, a small, blackened idol, no larger than his palm, carved from an unknown, obsidian-like stone. It depicted a grotesque figure, half human, half beast, with multiple eyes and gnarled limbs. The moment he touched it, an electric shock coursed through him, and the whispers in the room erupted into an unbearable shriek. The spectral face on the wall glowed with an internal hellish light, its mouth open in an eternal horrifying scream. Blackwood dropped the idol, his hands burning. He stumbled back, gasping for air, the room spinning around him. The air grew thick and heavy, laden with a palpable dread. He saw shadows coalesce in the corners of the room, writhing and indistinct, moving with an intelligence that was utterly alien. He knew with a terrifying certainty that he had awakened something. Finch, upon seeing photographs of the idol, identified it as a binding artifact, used to focus and channel the power of the old ones. He warned Blackwood that by disturbing it, he might have inadvertently accelerated the process of Alara Vance's capture, or worse, invited the entity fully into their reality. Finch believed Alara was not dead, but trapped in a liminal space, her consciousness being slowly consumed. The police force, increasingly frustrated by Blackwood's obsessive behavior and unscientific theories, was preparing to remove him from the case. But Blackwood knew he couldn't stop. He was too close, too deeply entangled. The whispers of the old ones were calling to him, revealing fragments of a truth more terrifying than any murder. He understood now. Alara Vance was just the first. The Moors, and Blackwood Croft, were merely the beginning of something truly horrifying. With the discovery of the binding idol and the intensifying presence in Blackwood Croft, Detective Inspector Blackwood found himself teetering on the brink of sanity. Dr. Finch, now fully committed to understanding the phenomenon, arrived in Oakhaven, bringing with him ancient texts and instruments designed to measure inexplicable energies. He confirmed Blackwood's fears. The veil between worlds, as he called it, was thinning rapidly around Blackwood Croft, drawn by the unwitting actions of Alara Vance and now, by Blackwood's own investigation. Finch explained that the Old Ones did not exist in a physical form as humans understood it. They were beings of pure consciousness, feeding on fear, despair, and the unraveling of reality. The ritual Alara Vance was researching, or inadvertently performing, was designed to create a bridge, a conduit for such an entity to manifest more fully in their world. The screaming face on the wall was not merely a residual image. It was a reflection of Alara Vance's current state, trapped and terrified on the other side of the thinning veil. Together, Blackwood and Finch conducted experiments in the cottage. Finch's instruments, strange contraptions of copper coils and shimmering crystals, registered immense fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, accompanied by sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature and the pervasive feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The whispers, now almost constant, coalesced into disjointed phrases in a language that seemed to tear at the fabric of the mind. One particularly disturbing night, as a thick, unnatural fog rolled in from the moors, Blackwood and Finch witnessed a horrifying phenomenon. The air in Alara's study shimmered and distorted, like heat rising from asphalt. Within the distortion, fleeting glimpses of a monstrous non-Euclidean landscape appeared. Impossible angles, shifting colors, and the silent, terrifying shapes of things that should not exist. It was a glimpse into the realm of the old ones. From this shimmering void, a chilling sound began to emerge. A wet, gurgling gasp, followed by a faint, desperate cry. It was Alara Vance. Her voice, distorted and agonizing, pleaded for help, her words echoing from an immense distance. The sound was unbearable, laced with unimaginable suffering. Blackwood felt a primal urge to reach out, to pull her back, but Finch held him firm. "We cannot interfere directly," Finch warned, his face pale. "Not yet. We need to understand the mechanism of their entry, or we risk being pulled in ourselves." Finch believed that the idol was not just a binding artifact, but also a key to the portal. It had to be either destroyed or used to seal the breach. But its ancient power meant it could not be easily handled. The more they deliberated, the more the entity's presence grew, becoming bolder. Objects began to move on their own. Books sliding off shelves, cutlery rattling in the kitchen. A foul, sulphurous odor permeated the air, and the cottage grew impossibly cold. The local authorities, now fully convinced of Blackwood's instability, issued an order for his psychological evaluation and suspended him from duty. Blackwood, however, ignored it. He knew the truth was within the cottage, and he was the only one who could face it. Finch, a quiet man of academia, found himself drawn into an impossible battle against forces he could barely comprehend. They were alone against an ancient, hungry entity, and the clock was ticking. The veil was almost entirely open. With the veil between worlds fully open and the entity's presence overwhelming Blackwood Croft, Detective Inspector Blackwood and Dr. Alastair Finch knew their time was running out. The cottage had become a nexus of otherworldly horror. Shadows writhed constantly, the air crackled with alien energy, and Alara Vance's tormented cries echoed ceaselessly from the shimmering portal. The moors themselves seemed to react, the fog growing denser, the landscape shifting subtly, reflecting the encroaching madness. Finch had one desperate theory. If the idol was the key, it could also be the lock. He believed that a specific counter-ritual, utilizing the same ancient symbols, could reverse the entity's entry and potentially even sever its connection to their reality. The catch: the ritual required immense focus, a precise re-etching of the symbols, and the courage to face the entity directly, using the idol as a conduit for expulsion. As they prepared, the entity launched a full-scale assault. Poltergeist activity became violent. Furniture was hurled across rooms, windows shattered spontaneously, and the walls oozed a thick, black ichor. Apparitions, grotesque and fleeting, flickered in their peripheral vision. The entity was fighting back, desperate to fully manifest. Blackwood, fueled by a grim determination, shielded Finch as he meticulously began to re-etch the symbols on the desk, following ancient diagrams Finch had found in the last remaining pages of Alara's hidden research. The air grew frigid, the temperature dropping to below freezing despite the season. The entity's presence solidified into a vast, oppressive force. They could feel its thoughts, alien and malevolent, pressing into their minds, promising unimaginable torment. The screaming face on the wall of the fireplace now appeared to be bursting forth, a grotesque, silent explosion of pure agony. As Finch completed the final symbol, Blackwood grasped the idol, its obsidian surface now pulsing with a faint, malevolent light. He held it up, facing the shimmering portal, and, following Finch's whispered instructions, began to chant the ancient words of reversal. The words were not human, but they flowed from his lips, ancient and resonant, vibrating through the very fabric of the cottage. The entity shrieked. It was a sound that tore at the very soul, a cosmic scream of pure, incandescent rage. The spectral shapes in the room lunged at them, their forms becoming momentarily solid, their claws tearing at the air around them. The floorboards buckled, and the roof groaned as if about to collapse. The portal itself began to destabilize, the grotesque landscape within it twisting and churning. Blackwood held firm, his eyes fixed on the idol, his voice unwavering in the face of absolute terror. He could feel the entity's immense power, a tidal wave of psychic force attempting to break his will, to pull him into the void. But he held on, fueled by the desperate hope of freeing Alara and sealing the horrors back where they belonged. Suddenly, with a sound like 1,000 glass shattering and a mighty gust of wind, the idol pulsed violently, and a surge of pure white energy erupted from it, tearing through the room. The entity recoiled, its form rippling and dissolving. The shimmering portal writhed, convulsed, and then, with a deafening roar that shook the entire cottage, it imploded inwards, vanishing completely. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. The oppressive cold lifted. The black ichor on the walls evaporated. The shattered windows remained broken, but the sense of overwhelming dread was gone. Blackwood stood panting, the idol in his hand now dull and inert, the energy drained from it. Finch collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. They found no trace of Alara Vance. The cottage, now quiet, held no more screams, no more whispers. The symbols on the desk were still there, a chilling reminder. Blackwood resigned from the police force, his mind forever altered by what he had witnessed. Finch continued his studies, now with a profound, terrifying understanding of the hidden realities. Blackwood Croft stands empty on the moors, a silent monument to a nightmare that almost consumed a village. The locals still whisper about the hungry fog and the moor spirits, but they don't know the full truth of what once lurked within its walls. They don't know about the old ones, or the brave few who fought to seal them away. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the desolate moors, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper can still be heard, a reminder that some walls don't just stand there. They remember.